Madden 21 is just around the corner, and we've been talking about it a lot lately on the channel. So today I want to go over 5 things that I absolutely believe Madden 21 will do much better than Madden 20. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that we're about to jump into the next generation of gaming. The new consoles will be coming out, and just off of the specs of these consoles and what they're going to allow not only EA but any company to do with their video games, there's tons of things that will get better just by default, but there's also some other things that were kind of an issue in Madden 20 that I could see definitely being cleaned up for 21 and being a much better version than what we saw this year. Now, if you're new to the channel and you always want to be up to date on the latest Madden news, especially the Madden 21 news, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so that you don't miss any of these uploads. Also, with Madden 21 being just around the corner, it likely means we're going to get another beta in a couple months, and just like last year, as most of you know, I usually get beta codes and game codes to give away when the game does drop. So we're getting kind of close to that, so make sure you're following on the social media because that's where I give away the codes, on Instagram and on Twitter. So just want to make sure you guys are following that because we're about to get into that serious Madden 21 season soon, and there's going to be giveaways and things like that coming, as there are every year. Now, enough rambling, let's get into the video. So number 1 on the list, I want to cover abilities because this is one of the things that I think is going to be much better next year. It's definitely not going away. So if you're one of those people that want abilities to go away, you think that they're too unrealistic or they're not real football, I mean, I get the arguments. There's been many times this year where abilities have made me hate the game. There's been other times where I've liked abilities. It just depends, you know, kind of on my mood that day or what's happening in the game. But abilities were definitely very unbalanced this year. They caused a lot of problems. I think they were fun at times, but again, if you're one of those people that want them to go away, they're not going away. This is going to be a big thing, I think, for EA going forward because the casual audience, the mass market audience really love them. So they're going to keep building off of these. We're going to see more abilities this year than we did for Madden 20. But I think they're going to be much better next year for multiple reasons. Number 1, much like with most games, especially something I have noticed with EA, they're usually much better in year 2 of a new feature than they were in the first year. You know, it's kind of been documented many times. Like they'll come out with something new, it's kind of buggy the first year, or you know, it's not balanced, and then the next year they clean it up and it's a lot better. Real player motion is one of the more recent examples of this. Real player motion debuted in Madden 19, and it was pretty awful. The player movement in 19 was some of the worst ever. There was only very few aspects of the real player motion that was actually good in 19. Most of it was bad. But Madden 20 player movement was much better. Now, is player movement all out realistic in Madden 20? I won't say it's all out realistic. It still needs improvement. But in terms of just the responsiveness of your player, moving your player, especially when running the ball or when, you know, using a player on defense, it's very responsive this year, and last year it wasn't the case. So that's kind of just a quick example of something they did much better in year 2. In year 2 of abilities, I think, like we've talked about on this channel before, they're going to reassess kind of some of the ones that were too overpowered, maybe rebalance those, maybe even remove some of the excessive ones out the game that weren't really needed and were a little too unrealistic, and they're going to tinker with it a little bit. But also, because of the power of the next-gen systems, I think you're going to see abilities play out much smoother than they did this year, because one of the biggest problems every year for games, especially as you start nearing the end of that console generation, is you start running out of memory, you have limitations. That's why certain things have to be removed from the game, and that, you know, exposes itself in the gameplay a lot of times with weird buggy things happening. So when you're moving to a new powerful console, I think you're going to see these things play out a lot better than they did in Madden 20. Now let's jump on to number 2. Number 2 is offline play, and I think that will excite a lot of people because there still are a lot of hardcore offline gamers, people that play franchise, people that, you know, started playing Face of the Franchise, the career mode this year, and things like that. I think offline is just going to continue to get better. It's still not where it was in its peak of PS2 days in terms of just having more features and depth, but I think the good thing going forward is this is going to kind of be the first time, at least for EA, when they jump to a new generation of console, where they're not going to have to like reboot everything, because a lot of the architecture remains the same, which is why you're probably going to see cross-gen play. So think of it like this: if you have a regular PS4 and someone else has a PS4 Pro, you guys can still play each other. It's not, even though the PS4 Pro is the better system and the more powerful system. Now, when you jump to the next generation of consoles, it's going to kind of be the same way. You're going to be able to play people on the previous generation, at least that's what they're saying, but you're going to still be on a better console, and there's going to be more power, and your game might be a little bit better as a result of that. And I think because the architecture is somewhat still the same, they don't have to rebuild things, and they have a lot of things in place to where, you know, when they move to new generations, a lot of times franchise mode would get stripped of its features and kind of start over again. You're not going to see that have to happen anymore. You're going to see the existing franchise mode that you have now carried over to next gen, and then they're going to keep putting new features or bringing back old features on top of it. So that's a plus. You should never see those offline modes get stripped of their features again. That's a really big thing in my opinion. But also things like the face of the franchise career mode sounds like it's something they really want to like hone in on going forward, because like with NBA 2K and their My Career, it's been so huge for them and it's been the biggest selling point of their game. And I think EA, even though they're really late to this party, they want to do that same thing with Madden and face of the franchise. So they're probably going to open up more positions this year. They'll probably make the story a lot more in depth, and they'll probably add more features to it. So I think offline play is going to be much, much better in 21 than it was in 20. And they seem to be focusing on it a little bit more these last 2 years than they did from, say, like Madden 13 to Madden 18, where they didn't really do too much for offline play outside of, you know, the long shot story mode. Number 3 on the list is gameplay. Now, let's be honest, Madden's gameplay is far from what many would consider good. It still needs a lot of work. It's still behind in a lot of areas. It gets very buggy. There's a lot of things that make you go like, you know, what the hell when you're playing the game. It can be a lot smoother. It could be a lot better. But again, when you're going to this next generation of console, just by default, the gameplay should get better. This is not just a Madden thing. This is any game, whether you play NBA 2K, FIFA, you know, if you play Call of Duty. The gameplay should be better, because this is something a lot of people don't really consider when they're playing these games. Like what I mentioned earlier, you start running out of memory, and you have, you know, hard drives with limited amount of space on it, and all these things are taking up space, and, you know, it sometimes causes the gameplay to be buggy just because of the fact that you don't have as much space on the game, or you don't have as much memory, or you don't have that capacity to like be perfect in a sense, right? Like your inputs sometimes don't match what happens on the field, and you get a really glitchy animation, a buggy animation. When you move to these next generation of consoles, you're going to have so much more memory. You're going to have the solid state drives this time around, which is huge, which is something computers have had for years, and one of the reasons why computer gaming is so much better than console gaming. Now that you have these SSDs in the new systems, the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, you know, I mean, it's going to make obviously things like load times much shorter as a result of that, but the gameplay should by default just be smoother. Now, does that mean Madden's gameplay is going to suddenly become great or top tier? I'm not saying that. I mean, there's still so much work that needs to be done with their gameplay that, you know, we could sit here all day and talk about that, but the gameplay should be smoother. It should be a little less buggy due to the fact that there's more power in these consoles, that they should be able to handle some of these animations and things like that better. Now, you know, of course, that will remain to be seen, but I think that that's a default thing for all games going into next gen. You're going to see a little bit better gameplay just by default. So, number 4 on the list is lighting. This might not be a big deal to a lot of you, but to some people it is. And I think lighting, just like in movies, in video games, it makes a very big difference. And with the fact that we're going to have ray tracing technology on the new systems, that's going to make the lighting so much different. Like, if you watch a real game and you watch Madden, you can easily point out things that make the video game look like a video game and not real life. You look at the fields, right? Like, the fields in Madden are pretty much kind of like one color. You know, certain things, you know, like the end zone paint and things like that, it just looks like one color. But in real life, because of the way the light hits these things, it's like different shades of that color, and it adds more depth to the look of the game. You're going to see, because of ray tracing, they're going to be able to focus the lighting on certain specific areas and kind of bring those areas out more. So you're going to see a game that just looks a lot better and more realistic. Because while this isn't the biggest deal to a lot of people, to most people they just care about, you know, gameplay and features, looks definitely still matters to a certain extent. We're, you know, in 2020, we want things to look as lifelike as possible because the technology available allows for that. So you're going to see the lighting in the games really look phenomenal going forward. And number 5 is similar to this, and that's graphics. Now, hear me out on this though, because it's not just graphics in the way you think of it. Now, of course, graphics get better every year. Some people would argue that some years the graphics get worse. I don't ever really see that. I think some years the lighting can get worse. Like, the lighting is really off some years. Like Madden 19, for example, I thought the lighting was awful. But like in terms of like player faces, the face scans, the the bodies, the stadiums, like those things usually just look better. And again, when you talk about next generation of consoles, I mean, just go back and look at Xbox 360 to Xbox One or PS3 to PS4. Very noticeable difference in the graphics in terms of how the faces looked, how much more realistic things looked. But not just that, I think you're going to see better graphics on the attention to detail aspects. Like, one thing I'm really looking forward to that I think will happen is the sidelines finally getting that long, overdue upgrade. Because when you look at the sidelines, they're just awful in Madden. The players don't even have names on the back of their jerseys. The player models aren't even like real models. They just look like really weird. They don't even look like football players. But I know a big reason because of this is it's the memory issue. It's the same reason they took the refs off of the field in Madden 20, because when they added abilities, the abilities took up a lot of memory, especially seeing as some of those abilities had animations tied to them. And I believe because of like the memory was just so capped out that it was like kind of like almost it slows the game down and it lags your game, and it makes for awful gameplay experience when stuff like that happens. So like that's why they remove refs from the field and things like that. But again, you go to next generation, you're going to get so much more memory, so much more power to work with, that not only are the graphics going to look better and more lifelike in terms of the field, the stadium, and the players, but I think you're going to be able to get those attention to detail things back and where they should be, because they're going to have more memory to work with. You should see referees back on the field, and they should look a lot better. You should see the sidelines at some point get upgraded. I don't know if that'll be a Madden 21 thing, but it would certainly be something I think would happen pretty soon into the new generation. You might see more stadium details than you were able to see before. It's just the capabilities of those new systems are going to be really, really crazy, and I think, or at least I would hope they would take full advantage of it, because they're going to have a lot more to work with than they have before. I think this generation leap is going to be a better generation leap than what we saw last time. So that's just, kind of my take on it. Those are the 5 things I think we'll see absolutely done better next year. Let me know what you think below, and as always, I will see you guys next time.